Let's be clear, man. When somebody dropped the line that Africans sold Africans, best believe they trying to justify a anti-black history in a way that gives receipts for your oppression and don't allow for you to challenge it. Africans selling Africans to slavery is an empirical attempt to erase how white folks uniquely benefited from enslaving black people. And nowhere in the world do we try to justify violence or suffering of a people by saying, well, these people kill each other, so why can't nobody else do it? Today we're dissecting the complicity myth. You know the complicity myth, the viral, persuasive way of saying that black people are equally responsible for engaging in the Atlantic slave trade? You know, the one that mystifies power and distinctions between being a prisoner of war, being a debt prisoner, being a indentured servant, and being in chattel slavery? You know that one right there. The argument typically goes like, because some African elites engaged in the Atlantic slave trade, this means that black people are equally responsible for the African slave trade, or it's just used as a way to silence or to disarm any type of accountability or acknowledgments that white people did some bad things. Let's be clear. When somebody dropped the African sold Africans line, it's definitely serving as a gotcha moment that's supposed to silence your ass from talking about reparations, white supremacy, or white accountability. And it also comes as a disingenuous way of being able to homogenize different African tribes by saying and fabricating this contemporary idea of the Pan-African identity to be able to say, well, because the Yoruba was selling the Mafa tribe, this means that Africans are selling Africans. You know, we never talk about that when it comes to Germany invading Poland. We don't say white people invaded white people. We see them as being two different sovereign nations, and we see it as being different tribes and identities. But somehow when it comes to black folks doing black folks, it's always a way to say, black folks did it to each other, so why are you mad about this? Or you should do something about first how black folks do it to each other before you even address how other people do it to black people. And it's just like, bro, what the hell are you talking about? This is what it looked like. It looks like white people telling black people to shut the hell up because Africans sold Africans into slavery. What it looks like is black Republicans trying to save their masses from responsibility or criticism and saying you can't get mad at massa because your own people sold your own people. And this complicity myth, we're always able to take the way that Europeans are complicit in waging violence against each other and oppressing each other, and we don't see it as white-on-white crime. We don't see it as white people killing white people. For World War I and World War II, we normalized the way in which white folks fuck up white folks, and we never use it as justification to say, well, you can't be mad at these people fucking over white people. You can't be mad at these people messing over white people, because white people mess up people too. Huey P. Newton said that power is the ability to define the phenomenon and make it act in a desired manner. And the phenomenon we're getting in today is the complicity myth, man. The complicity myth that you see all in these viral videos, that you see in the half-baked history rooms, that you see in the pseudo-lectual comment sections of the Facebook pages, all the various ways to try to disarm black people when it comes to white supremacy, accountability, and reparations, man. What this means for us as black people is that it is a psychological trap of trauma. One that gets us to internalize anti-blackness that says that because Africans sold you into slavery, this means you can't be critical with the economy that was built on your back. Shout out to King Cotton. Oh man, today we dissecting how people shuck and jive when it comes to talking about history, specifically when they trying to rationalize with slavery and trying to center that because Africans sold Africans into slavery, this means you better not say shit about the people of European descent uniquely benefiting from it because, hey, your people did it in the first place. Hey, when person A steal from person B and get a person C, should person C give the stolen shit? Usually what it is. Even in terms of the hood, if these white folks know you are willingly buying from a booster, y'all know it's Christmas time, there's gonna be a lot of people hitting up their fellow boosters and talking about, hey, can you get this, can you get that? It is illegal to buy illegally possess shit. You feel me? This video I'm gonna show y'all is this dude that loves to use his black bravado, his black masculinity, his ability to try to be cool and screaming, hooting, hollering, all this old shit to appeal to white folks. You know what I'm saying? He's shucking and jiving. He being an anti-black apologist that's sympathizing in white supremacy in a way to make it way individually benefits at the expense of the collective. What we would call being a sellout, or what some people would call being an Uncle Tom, but I don't like to use it that way.
White people got some nerve convincing half the world that we're violent. Same racist ancestor that captured and tormented my ancestors for profit.
Stop looking past the fact that they bought your mother ass. They ain't oppressed, enslaved, and capture your mother ass. They bought you from the other niggas that was selling you. Y'all keep trying to forget the fact that Africa had slaves. They sold their slaves. What part you ain't getting?
Right here is an illustration of what I was talking about when I say what it looks like. It looks like a person shucking and jiving at the expense of black people's dignity and being able to mystify slavery to try to appeal to white folks. I'm gonna use my portable skills as being an African-American studies major, you know what I'm saying, getting my little old degree, and just talking about how it is empirically false to say that Africans sold Africans into slavery as being the full picture. This is a psychological trap that's designed to get us to internalize our ancestors' oppression as being their fault. For everybody else, it's an intellectual pacifier to baby y'all into anti-blackness, to literally feed y'all on a Similac of anti-blackness to make it where when y'all grow up to be intellectual adults, some of y'all still be childish in the hell, you still buy into the pacification of saying white folks didn't do anything. For everybody else, it serves as an intellectual pacifier to absolve them from thinking about slavery in a way that the very life they live, the material reality that they exist in, was made possible through slavery. In a world that's situated on capitalism, we always talk about the distribution of wealth and how things get passed down from generation to generation to generation to generation to generation. All descendants of enslaved peoples always think about the way we have not been given shit. That's why we talk about reparations. But the descendants of the slave master and the overseers, they don't never want to be blamed for the past, but they always want to hold on to the shit their ancestors left them from the past. This is one of those other trick of times. It's a surface level argument. It's simple. See, it was a business transaction. Everybody was guilty. Get over it. It framed the entire continent of Africa as a monolith. It reduces the most catastrophic forced migration in human history. If you don't believe so, I will burn your ass in the debate, to a simple act of tribal betrayal. It ignores the scale, the technology, the ideology, and the purpose of the European-driven system versus existing limited practice and servitude in Africa. It is intellectually dishonest and disingenuous to try to say that the reality that black people will be subject to, or the African people will be subject to on that boat in the New World, is what the African people knew they was getting into. As well as disingenuous to try to say, because there are certain instances that I'm not denying, that there were African elites that sold black people, or that sold their own people, or that sold rivalry tribes into slavery. There are also different African leadership, different African king and queens that fought directly against the enslavement of Europeans. So to try to make it like it was all this, it's some shucking and jiving, bootlicking bullshit. I remember watching a great series called Underground. And in Underground, it was this light-skinned brother that was a enslaved person as well, that made a career out of being a slave catcher, as well as engaging and trying to appeal to the master, always at the expense of people that was enslaved on the plantation. Even though niggas that I showed y'all love to try to talk about who set up slavery and who should get off the plantation, what he doing in this video, in the video I just showed y'all, is him acting exactly like that slave on Underground that was always peddling, doing business for white supremacy at the expense of the niggas he was around. There's no way for you to say, y'all keep on forgetting that niggas sold niggas so they weren't oppressing you. Man, listen, man. If you buy some crack from one person and you sell it to the other person, is these white folks gonna say it's not your fault, there ain't no issue because you bought the crack from somebody else? No. This is how I know y'all be being purposely disingenuous. You purposely obtuse when you try to talk about, well, black people sold black people into slavery and you can't be. You trying to reduce one of the most catastrophic dehumanizations in world history. For what? To appeal to the ethics and morals of white folks? Couldn't be me, man. Couldn't be me. This little myth people engage in only further serves racial global capitalism that tries to sustain black suffering by saying, hey, because African souls Africans and they're African, this means justifying endless exploitation and profits on black suffering because, hey, we ain't started. When I say global racial capitalism, I mean an economic order built on assigning a less than human value to certain racial groups to extract land and labor and cheaply as possible. I would almost argue that capitalism gets to define itself very, very specifically in the Americas based off of slavery. How can I get the most while giving the least? Nowadays, we call that lazy. Hey, when you hear the idea that Africans sold Africans into slavery, you gotta ask the question, how did Africans benefit from King Cotton? When they talk about Africans selling Africans into slavery, they make it as if African people were in cahoots with the Europeans and was gonna benefit uniquely from the Europeans being there. We don't wanna get into the manipulation. We don't wanna get into the abductions. We don't wanna get into the exploitation of how different bodies was apprehended. When we talk about Africans selling Africans, that glosses over all the unique instances that wasn't like that. When we view Alex Haley, when he writes Roots, he does he does some genealogical research, and that's how we get the story of Kunta Kinte, who is abducted. The way that white folks and Europeans was able to colonize and enslave in Africa during the 1500s, 1600s or whatever, allowed for them to come back for the scramble of Africa and then colonize Africa. So how are you able to justify European violence then? When we're talking about power, because this conversation is one about power, it's about who gets what, when, where, and how, who gets to determine that shit. And we talk about who had the power, who had the naval academies, who had the infrastructure, who had the ability to manipulate the entire global market, is Europeans. This is how power mystifies itself and how we let white people and the Europeans get away of creating entire worlds, entire countries based off of the way they engage in thug culture. Today, human trafficking and abducting people is bad. As a matter of fact, today, white people try to justify their part of the white people and niggas like this try to justify white people's involvement within the entire training ecosystem of human trafficking as a way to say, well, because the ecosystem already existed, then we shouldn't be. Man, stop playing. A historical example, a receipt, as one would put it, is King Zinga of Congo. Before I move on, let's really just unpackage what we just read and what King Alfonso exposes when it comes to this narrative about Africans selling Africans. It always wants to paint our ancestors, it always wants to paint different African people as being passive, docile dumbasses that was either inherently demonic and was down for the selling of their own people, or some people that was just stupid, they didn't know no better, that just laid down. You see King Alfonso as an example that shows that no, there actually was resistance to European enslavement. And we have it documented. No, everybody wasn't assimilating to the way that Europeans was bringing over, talking about human cargo. No, every slave that touched the boat wasn't sold by another African. Some of them were abducted and stolen. This example should clear up that niggas was just willingly saying, here you go, just handing them out. You don't know what you're doing, just giving them out. Like just showing that it's false. Queen Nzinga, for over 30 years, she led a military and diplomatic war against these old Portuguese slave traders. She formed a whole bunch of different alliances because, solidarity and coalition building is good with a whole bunch of different rival powers, showing y'all it was already different ways of tribes to be able to have a shared collective enemy. You know what I'm saying? Even so much where she was including rival powers of the Dutch to fight against the Portuguese. She was offering sanctuary to escaped slaves and train her army in guerrilla warfare. She wasn't a collaborator. She wasn't a middleman. Queen Nzinga is one of the earliest, fiercest anti-colonial revolutionaries on the African continent that should easily lay to rest that because Africans sold Africans, you better get to kiss these white folks' ass. So what's another thing too? Y'all caught the part of him saying that white folks bought your ass from other Africans and then freed you. This is a common way that I feel like niggas love to lick the boots of white folks without pointing out who was white people fighting against to free black people, quote unquote. Other white people. Get back into the trick of time. Niggas love to spout this horrible product of American education facts and saying that white folks freed black people first. 1803. I believe it's over 60 years before 1865. In 1803, the Haitian Revolution happened where you had black people freeing themselves from white servitude, from white captivity. And what we know is that after black people freed themselves in 1803 in a little island, St. Domingo or Haiti, whatever you know what I'm saying, that the slave masters in America made sure we never learned about it, just like a lot of y'all never learned about King Alfonso or Queen Nzinga being active anti-colonists, being active anti-slavery, you know what I'm saying? Technically being abolitionists, damn near. It's like, man, y'all stop playing, man. On my pawpaw grave, saying Africans sold Africans in the 1700s is bullshit. It's finesse. It's like saying the Europeans sold the Europeans because the French king also captured English soldiers. We don't never say that. That white people enslaved white people because they was bringing over indentured servants. We get real specific when we start talking about the delineations between what white folks was doing to other white folks and how they wasn't doing it to black people. All of a sudden, distinctions matter. All of a sudden, delineating matter. When we start talking about Africans, Southern Africans, it's all homogenous. It's all monolithic. It's all the one story. When you have the Highlanders and the Lowlanders beating up on each other in Scotland, the entire world don't adopt the perspective of Lowlanders that the Highlanders had. When we talk about the conflicts of the Irish or the conflicts of any European context, the entire world don't adopt the perspective that one European has over the other European. But that's something that happened that's unique to slavery. The entire world bought into the idea that black equals slave. The entire world bought into the idea that enslaved people had no culture, no language, no customs, and this justified their suffering. When Africans is quote unquote Southern Africans, they're not Southern as culturalist people. They're not Southerners as people that have no customs and no language, no traditions. But somehow that what becomes the anti-black misnomer or the anti-black message, the dog whistle to the rest of the world. When niggas start being critical about power and white supremacy and reparations, this will begin to. And there are certain people that want to mystify it because you believe being able to stabilize the comfort zone of white people is going to make you where you benefit as an individual. That's literally selling out. That's literally shucking and jiving and being a Tom. Let's say an organized crime puts a gun to your head, kidnaps your family, and forces you to sign over a deed to your house at gunpoint. Then they sell your shit to a developer. Who is guilty? The crime ring with the gun, or the developer who knowingly received stolen property. Now imagine this shit 400 years ago. The descendants of the crime ring own half of the city built on those stolen deeds. They point to you, you're scared, court signature and say, see, you sold it. They'll say it's a fair transaction. We know it's not a fair transaction. They'll say they're not responsible. We know they're responsible. That's absurd. It's a crime logic, focusing on the sale or the signature of the deliberate transaction from the initial act of the armed robbery and kidnapping. The power of the gun. It's not ironic that the biggest population of Africans outside of Africa is in Brazil. Brazil is a Portuguese colony. That's the reason why they speak Portuguese there. It's the reason why, whether we're talking about King Alfonso, Queen Nzinga, both of them had to deal with the Portuguese Empire and how they were uniquely kidnapping niggas. As a matter of fact, to me, I think about it like this. White people were willing to engage in some inhumane shit that would definitely go against the social contract. If you believe that they would just, I want to make sure before I pick up this Negro that I legitimately buy him and I don't want to steal him. You smoking dope and dog food if you believe that. When niggas say Africans sold Africans into slavery, it showed that you have a perspective of your people through the eyes of white folks. It actually showed that you don't see your people for your own people. You see us through the eyes of white people. And that's the reason why you're able to have this homogenous idea of niggas doing things to each other. It's the idea that says this: because I see the worst examples of black people doing shit to each other, I'm gonna make black Republicans responsible for that. That's the reason why y'all love to distance yourself from the black community, which is textbook anti-blackness. The power of the gun, the Portuguese warship, the British musket, is what made the sale possible. That's what King Alfonso and Queen Nzinga were fighting against. The bearer of guns, not a free market. So some would say, should we just ignore African complicity? Nope, I'm not saying that. We should contextualize it correctly though. We should contextualize it correctly while acknowledging that there are African nations that's complicit in slavery, that's doing something that's abstractly different from all the European ones. Not only are they trying to give material ways to give retribution for what they did, like literally saying you sorry. It's a part of the healing process and restorative justice, so what I'm saying some scholars would say. We should use context and we should contextualize correctly. We study it with the same nuance that we apply European collaborators with the Nazis. We don't say Germans killed Jews to absolve Hitler. We understand the system of Nazism, the coercion, the ideology, and who ultimately in charge. As a matter of fact, when it even comes to Jewish persecution, we know that Jewish people have been being fucked over since the beginning of time. We don't say that Hitler is justified in fucking over Jews because people have been doing it. We never say that anti-Semitism is justifiable in America because it was already going. These are all different ways of how we try to say certain anti-black violence should be justifiable or rationalized with, because it's been going on. It's been going on. It's been going on. We must do the same here. The focus must remain on the architects of the system and not those who were caught in this destabilizing vortex. Another argument y'all gonna say is you're just trying to make white folks feel guilty and avoid black accountability. As you can see, if you're being real and you're not being purposely obtuse within the two examples I gave above, they're both dealing with the uniqueness and nuance of black people being complicit while also making white folks feel guilty. What blows my mind about the concept of white guilt is that in every other instance, the notion of guilt is seen as being accountability. It's seen as being responsibility. When a judge asks my homeboy, my mom, or my daddy, are you guilty? And they say yes, that is seen as something that's supposed to be celebrated. But somehow when you racialize guilt and put white in front of it, all of a sudden notions of guilt become bad. All of a sudden notions of guilt become a way for you to weaponize responsibility and accountability. That's crazy. Y'all don't have that same issue when it comes to niggas y'all criminalizing that courthouse. Keep that same energy. Yeah, this is about accuracy though and not guilt. Accurate history assigns accountability, and accountability is not the same as guilt. It's responsibility to understand how this is engineered system created the wealth gap, anti-blackness, policing, and the stereotypes we live with today. Furthermore, black scholars and communities do grapple with the complex legacy of collaboration in Africa. It's the reason why literature bases like Afro-pessimism exists, that deals with how the entire world, including the African diaspora, bought into black equal enslaved and bought into African Americans and people in the West, the enslaved descendants of the West, being cultureless, being without language, being without nation, going through what Afro-pessimists say is natal alienation. Well, what Afro-pessimists say is complete dishonor. These are all ways and examples of how black scholars is already dealing with and grappling with the unique, complex history and how the entire world bought into the dehumanization of particular peoples of African descent. And in being real, the idea that Africans sold Africans was also used for white people to be able to suture their guilt when it comes to what they did in the scramble of Africa and what they currently doing in the continent of Africa. We see that throughout the world, the idea that niggas fucking up niggas is always used to justify and further rationalize with black suffering. Because if I can prove that black people brought the suffering of black people too, this means you can't be that mad at me. Because everybody's doing it. I got kids, and as a father, that's some shit that kids say. As somebody that used to be a 9th and 10th grade English teacher, my students should say, well, everybody's doing it. When y'all say Africans sold Africans, that's what y'all doing. Y'all engaging in 9th grade, 10th grade logic that wants to be elusive and dance around responsibility and accountability. Anytime a kid say everybody's doing it, they saying, you shouldn't be that mad at me, because I ain't the only one. Really what it is I done put these leather pants on, bro. And shit, I felt like I had to, proverbially step out on this nigga couch like Rick James did on Dave Chappelle shit. You feel me? I put these on because I am intellectually putting these leather pants in this Jordan 11 foot down y'all asses, and I'm turning. And I felt like the leather pants would add a little pizzazz to the intellectual analysis I'm laying down on while y'all be lost in the sauce of power and trying to make it as if niggas just was inherently dumb or inherently always looking to fuck each other over. And this gets in the way of how we have black unity, because you're always able to create a reality that says we never had black unity even before the beginning of time. And we don't get to think about how there are maroon communities. We don't think about how there was a bunch of solidarity amongst the diaspora, throughout the diaspora, regardless of what these white folks want to tell you. These white folks will give us a narrative to justify what they did, to make sure we don't do it to them. Insidious, right? Conflictual, right? That's really what it is. And when you have black people that parrot white conservative speaking points, and they do it in a way where they think they being intellectual, not only is it a slap in our face, to me it reflects their character. It reflects who raised them. And a lot of them just need to go to therapy. A lot of y'all are suffering from a childhood where other black people maybe questioned, negotiated, created authenticity tests about your blackness. And now as an adult, you're trying to compensate for the way that the child in you wants to prove they are black enough. Or for some of y'all gave up the idea of trying to be black enough because you got tired of being trivialized because of the trauma and the stress I'm not negating on, and you decided you was gonna always try to appeal to white folks. Instead of negotiating about this, I'd rather be the black Republican. It's funny to me that the very black Republicans that always talk about why everything gotta be about race, they love to sensationalize their race in relationship to being a conservative. Say, I ain't like the niggas over there. People sold black people into slavery is used as a racist trope to always making sure that we have distrust around black leadership and always make sure that we're skeptical around black unity. Because if niggas was messing up with niggas then, what do I expect from them now? So when you hear this shit like this, don't get stuck in debating the sliver of our argument or the sliver of a truth or the sliver of, you know what I'm saying, what happened historically. Account for the entirety of how history works, specifically when it comes to black involvement or African involvement within slavery. The African identity wasn't one that existed before European enslavers got there. It's one that European enslavers inscribed the African identity onto the continent to justify their enslavement. That's very important. Even the homogenized idea of you black and I'm black, that is an idea that the colonizer, that the enslaver, that the European brought over to the continent to justify and rationalize ethically with what they were doing. To make it way, business is business, man. Africans sold Africans, the Europeans sold Africans, everybody was selling Africans. It's okay. Yeah, when you hear this, don't get stuck in debating the sliver of the truth. Reframe the question. Ask who designed the system? Who financed it? Who provided the ideology of racism to justify it? Who today holds the most wealth and power that their system extracted? All of these gonna point to the same people. Because, you know, always asking the questions of who and how always gets the conversation going a little bit further. Always make sure we can go a little bit deeper in something instead of putting more breadth in something. Because, you know, it's always depth over breadth. Shout out to my debate people. Shift the demand from admit guilt to pursue accountability. Accountability looks like supporting rigorous history education, honest institutional audits, and yes, reparative justice. It means recognizing that the crime wasn't just a sale, but the entire century's worth of project of racial capitalism that justified anti-black violence and manipulated a bunch of people in the world to buy into the servitude and suffering of black folks. This racial capitalism, this global racial capitalism that some were manipulated into, but the others were willfully created and proliferated from and still do. This is research of a me search where I try to uplift your vocabulary and ways of thinking about yourself in the world. Education is elevation. Until next time, subscribe to the Substack channel if you want access to any of these examples that I have or get more into the readings that's referenced in this, as well as having a nice, good faith conversation about slavery, who's responsible for slavery, who benefited the most from slavery, and how slavery ideas still evolve today, how they still go to the day.